Everything is very accessible. Data can be accessed. People can be accessed. Decisions are taken incredibly fast because you have very short communication lines.
Hi, I'm Flora. I'm responsible for the analytics recruitment in EU at Wayfair, and I'm here today with Jens, who's leading the competitive intelligence and pricing team, and we will talk about his team and about a new opening in his team, about a senior manager position. So let's start. Jens, can you please tell me, why did you join Wayfair?
Yes, thank you, Flora. And I think it's a very good opening question because my path to Wayfair was not at all straightforward. So I'm a trained physicist, and after my PhD in physics, I started a career as a laser engineer, and I worked hands-on on laser development before I then joined McKinsey to learn project management consulting. And then one day I was approached by a recruiter on LinkedIn and asked if I'd be interested in a position in Wayfair. And Wayfair at that time didn't tell me anything. So I did my research and I found that it's like $1 billion company that still grows at a rate that you would typically expect for a startup. And I was intrigued by that. That was amazing. I don't know many companies like that. And I was invited for an interview. When I met people at Wayfair, this initial impression was actually confirmed. So it's like a big company, corporate, with the spirit of a startup. And what does it mean? It means everything is very accessible. Data can be accessed. People can be accessed. Decisions are taken incredibly fast because you have very short communication lines. And all of this fosters a culture that empowers employees. It's like almost an entrepreneurial culture where all those possibilities, the access, makes you want to do things. And this is what I came to like a lot about Wayfair, and I still enjoy it, and the impression that I had at the first day didn't much change.
And you mentioned that you studied physics and started to work in laser engineering. How did you have this change that you will start to work at a consulting company?
That's interesting. So actually today, in my role at Wayfair in pricing and competitive intelligence, I can use many of the methods that I learned in my training as a physicist, meaning mathematical modeling, statistical modeling. It all comes back. I have introduced already quite a few of those methods very successfully here.
And you also mentioned that Wayfair is still fast growing, and it is a fast changing environment. Is it challenging on a daily basis in your job?
It can be challenging, but as I said, also empowering. And what is it about? We reprioritize often. We adapt to a fast-changing environment. So there are some things that will always stay important, but maybe 50% of your work changes a lot. Like something that was important today might not be important tomorrow because we're so fast at saying, hey, this doesn't work. Let's stop it. Let's try something new. And this, let's say it's challenging, but it's a positive kind of challenging because it keeps you engaged. It motivates you to rethink your priorities again and again.
And before you joined Wayfair, was there anything that made you hesitant about the company?
Yeah, that's a good question because in one of my interviews by the head of algorithms and analytics, I was essentially asked the same question. My answer was, yes, furniture. Furniture industry is something I've never worked with before, and honestly, furniture didn't tell me that much at that time. So this made me a bit hesitant. But then I had already learned that, let's say, at its core, Wayfair is a tech company. So the secret sauce is technology and scientific approaches to retail. And this was one thing that had convinced me. The other thing is I have come to love furniture. It sounds very simple, but I hadn't been exposed to furniture and, let's say, furnishing a nice home before. But then when I started working with it, I found that, first of all, it gives me something back. I came to appreciate something like a vase that is really nice and that I also now put in my home and which I enjoy. And I didn't really notice that it mattered before, and now it matters. And I noticed that it really gives a lot to people. So furnishing your home, like expressing who you are, is something that is very, very important to people. especially now during the time of the lockdown where people are more and more at home, we notice how much nice deco, nice furniture, a nice living environment actually gives to people. And I enjoy that because it's a topic that I can relate to with others.
So we can say that you are more interested in furniture and decorating your home.
That's right.
And let's talk about about your team. So what does your team do, the competitive intelligence and pricing team do?
Yes. So if I had to summarize it in one sentence is, as the pricing and competitive intelligence team, we realize long-term value for the company. But that's actually a tricky piece. And if you go one level deeper, you cannot answer it in one question anymore. First of all, it's technically challenging. And then it's also that you have to balance interest. So we need to have a certain price level to make a profit because we have to pay salaries, we have to pay rent, we have to have cash to invest in future technology. But then on the other hand, we put the customer in the focus, and customers obviously enjoy low prices. We want to offer a competitive price to customers so that they enjoy purchasing something, and when they purchase it, they know they have made a good deal and they're happy with the product that they got for a certain price, and they will tell their friends about it, and they will also shop with Wayfair. And this is essentially how we grow and how we grow a happy customer base. And so balancing those two, the need to make a profit and the objective to offer good and competitive prices to customers, this is what we need to balance on a day-to-day. The approach that we take is a scientific one. We use algorithms, we use models, and those are fed by different inputs. And lastly, there's the component of cost. If you talk about price and profit, you always have to think about cost. So we have to understand where's actually the cost. What are the real costs of our products so that we know what the price should be. And putting all of this together in algorithms, in model, helps us to find the optimal price for long-term value.
And how is our pricing strategy different than at other companies?
What I mentioned, we use scientific methods. So we have data scientists, we have demand scientists, we use data to inform our strategy. And I think this is different. So with many other companies, you would find a pricing that is motivated by the need for profit that you have. I need to make this much profit to pay my salaries, so let's put that margin. That's a very simple pricing strategy, and it might not offer always the best price to the customer that the customer actually expects to see.
Yeah, that definitely sounds interesting. And talking more about your team, how big is your team at the moment?
This is part of a global team. Europe is one part, but then in the US, where our mother company, Wayfair US, sits in Boston, we have a much larger pricing team that is part of the algorithms and analytics, again putting the focus on our scientific approach to pricing. And also the competitive intelligence team is part of a larger team in Boston that is complemented by an engineering team, like an engineering branch that really productionizes our data acquisition and things that we develop. We can work with engineering to eventually productionize them.
You mentioned the US team. How is the cooperation with the US team? Are you working a lot together?
Collaboration with our US counterparts is, I have to say, great. I really enjoy it. And this is because it's not only adopting what has been done and tested in the US, but we're actually co-developing solutions that will be rolled out globally. So it's a collaboration at the same level. And this is something that I really enjoy. It's stimulating, it's fruitful, and it can be very engaging because with our US teams, there are many, many more resources that we can tap into to realize things that we believe are important, not only on a local scale for Europe, but actually on a global scale.
And now let's talk a bit about the position, because that's why we have this discussion now, because you have a senior manager opening in your team. So what will the senior manager do in this new role at your team?
The senior manager would lead the team of 4 that we currently have in the competitive intelligence in Europe. And one major part would be working against the existing roadmap, against the existing key results, but then also developing the future roadmap. I mentioned it's a very entrepreneurial spirit, and there's always opportunity that will bring value add based on the data that competitive intelligence acquires. So this would be the second part of that work. How is this done? I think what's special about the role is, first, the manager essentially oftentimes works alongside the team. Like it's a manager-doer role. You don't only give the direction, but you also take your share of the work and implement it, build it out yourself. The other part is cross-functional work. The competitive intelligence team is very well connected to all other teams. I talked about missing products. So we would work with the buying team in case we don't have a supplier for that product. We would work with our catalog management team in case we see we already do have a supplier for that product. Obviously, we work with our category management teams to inform them where we should be more competitive in our pricing. We work with our exclusivity teams for products where we see they should be exclusive, but they're not. This is, let's say, a whole network of stakeholders that this senior manager has within Wayfair.
And you mentioned that the senior manager will also lead a team. What would you say, what would be the split between the responsibilities of leadership responsibilities and other operational or strategical tasks?
As I've had that role myself, I am confident to say that it's pretty much a 50-50 split. So half of the time it's setting future priorities, doing already, let's say, the initial seed work of knowing, does it work, launching maybe a small MVP, a pilot, or just testing out if something is possible. And the other half is working against the priorities that we have, delivering against it, solving the day-to-day problems that you always encounter in quality, in bottlenecks, in blockers. This is, I would say, what the work split is roughly like.
You mentioned that Wayfair is a manager-doer environment. Are you still involved in the operational tasks?
Yes, every day. So even at the manager level, I am involved, or I know what the teams do in the day-to-day, and I help to debottleneck. So if there is a problem, and with my experience and background, I know how to solve it, either myself directly, I would teach a team member or show how to do it practically, like as in a pair environment, or I'm very well connected and I can direct people to the right counterparts, how to solve the problem. But I would say every day I dive into practical work and I help to debottleneck it myself, or to really understand where the issue is to help the team to structure it and eventually progress.
And how much time do you spend on coding?
That's a good question. 30 minutes every day, I would say.
Okay.
Might be a bit surprising because, in many companies you wouldn't expect the managers to also code, but I think it's a good exercise to know what your data sources are, to know where data are, and also to bring special skills to the team. Like when I can solve a problem and I spend time on it, then this might stimulate the team to develop it further and to come to a better solution. And this is also something that this kind of involvement is something that I expect from all of my managers. Know your work, know the details, and be able to do it yourself.
And during the recruitment process, in the application review or during the interviews, how do you know that the candidate will be a good fit in your team and in this position?
For that specific position, I'm looking for a candidate that has a very well-rounded profile. Obviously, we need someone with a certain tech acumen. So you must have technology skills, SQL, Python, or any other programming language. So I'm not looking for an engineer or someone who's like a perfect deep expert in Python, but if you have knowledge about some programming language, if you have ingrained that thinking, the algorithmical, programmatical thinking, then this is exactly the profile that I'm looking for. I said well balanced because the other part of it is actually communication skills and experience in communication. This role is really about talking to others, identifying what are their problems, how can we solve those, and then collaborating in solving them. And this is both with local stakeholders in the EU, with all those different teams, but it's also true globally when you work across the pond with the larger US teams. Communication is really an important part to get things done. You will not be successful if you try to just do it by yourself. It has to happen in the ecosystem. And the third character trait that I'm actually looking for is someone who appreciates this entrepreneurial environment that Wayfair offers. So someone who is ambitious and who embraces taking opportunities.
Would you say, is there any red flag if a candidate gives you an answer? Is there any specific answer, but would you say that's a no-go?
No, there's no general red flag. So
Okay.
I'm actually happy to get to know the candidates personally. I typically do a hiring manager interview very early in the process to actually get to know each other. It's supposed to be a balanced interview. I explain more details about what we're doing, what the role is about. I will ask a couple of questions, and then there's always time to ask questions back and to engage in this dialogue. So there's no red flag that I could identify. It really depends on this exchange, getting to know. And if that is successful, if we notice this is a fit, this is like a huge overlap in skills and interest, then we advance to the next stage and we do this broader hiring panel with more detailed interviews, with more interviewers involved, and also a small case.
When you did the interview process at Wayfair, what was the most difficult part in the whole process for you?
To be honest, I didn't find it difficult. I entered this exchange mode really quickly. I enjoyed the interviews. I met nice, interesting people. I had the feeling I had very good conversations. Also, this case interview, it was more like a conversation. It was very fluid, and overall, I experienced my own hiring as a very pleasant day.
Oh, that's always good to hear. Okay. And would you give any tip for the candidates who will apply for this position, how they can prepare for the interview?
Yes, the general tip is get yourself familiar with what Wayfair is. There's a lot of stuff in the news around Wayfair. Get some background, familiarize yourself with the website. What is actually the offering that Wayfair has? I think this is the most important part. Know a bit about Wayfair, know about your own strength and what you want. And apart from that, be relaxed and be yourself.
What's been the hardest problem or issue that you have had to solve at Wayfair so far?
Yeah, now I have to get in the weeds, Flora. But yes, there are many challenging problems, but one of the most challenging problems I had to crack, and that I'm still cracking, is actually in pricing around cost. So for many of the products that we sell, they're new. We have not sold them before, and shipping them to the customer from the supplier location is actually a major part of the cost. And very often we don't know exactly before we sell it what it would cost, and we have to make an estimate. If that estimate goes wrong and I estimate, shipping this from Italy to Hamburg costs us 25 euros and we end up paying 40 euros from that, this is directly taken out of our profit, and we might even lose money on that product. So that's very bad if I make a mistake. The other way around, I estimate that it might cost 40 euros and we adjust the price accordingly and it ends up costing only 25 euro. Then we make a product that is actually, that has a very good cost structure. We make it more expensive than it actually should be, and it's bad for the customer. So this is a challenging task, and if you don't do it correctly, it can go wrong in both directions. So actually any deviation hurts someone. It either hurts me or it hurts our customers, and so indirectly it also hurts me. And solving this challenging problem based on historical data that you have, based on knowledge of the current setup of your logistic network. And yeah, I think this was one of the hardest problems to crack.
And you managed to solve it, so.
I think we did a pretty good stab at it, and it's also a very good example of a problem that we recognized and then took a global approach. So I'm not working on it alone. We recognize that it's actually a global problem, that we're not perfect at estimating those costs, that there are frequent mistakes in estimating those costs. So we said, let's find a global approach that works for the US, that works for Germany, for the UK, that is adaptable, but also accurate. And this is what we're currently developing. I think it's a very good example of a challenging task that we solve in a global setup.
So thank you. I think it was very useful, and I hope it will be useful for you as a potential candidate at Wayfair.